conversation about my first inspirations on my spiritual path. And you were one of them. And I don't know if you knew that at the time. I didn't realize it at the time.
Not
You know?
at the time. Not at the time.
Yeah, and it's and I didn't really realize it until my paradigm shift in 1998. And here's to people who have inspired us. Here's to people that are still with us, who have left the physical realm and are in the non-physical now, who are our guides, who are our inspirations as well. In the physical plane, my name is Ron Vesey, and this is Mark Alexander. He's my stepbrother, and he and I have been, I've known him for 40 years now. It's been 40 years. And as when we were a child, we were both 12. He was just 13.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And
Yeah.
and I was 12, and we've always had a really, really good bond. And he's always been a very kind of a solitude. He's always liked his solitude, always. And as a result, maybe some people in school maybe thought he was just totally misunderstood, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't misunderstand him because I knew him, you know. It's like, but when people look from the outside, looking at somebody, and they come to a conclusion about somebody, it always kind of,
It's kind of like, oh, they're kind of weird.
yeah.
A little bit off. Okay.
But you know, it's just fabulous. And he's always been an avid ice skater. He was almost professional level.
Well, I was actually. I mean, I did I was very fortunate to compete nationally, and then after that, my life just took a different turn after I came across Yogananda and his autobiography. I mean, Out on a Limb is what really got me there.
Yeah.
And Shirley MacLaine and her journey and Peaceful Warrior. But I love
The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, right, by Dan Millman.
by Dan Millman.
Yep.
Yeah. So the skating was kind of like my, way to be. It was very reclusive for me because I was a solo skater, and it was kind of like my own little world in there, and I loved it, and I loved the athletic part of it, and the showmanship I always had a challenge with.
What do you mean by that?
Like the showmanship and the performing, and the really just like being there present, like the people on stage and in the movie world, just really performing in a way that they're owning it.
Right. Right.
So
You
that
had
was
a problem
always
with that.
Yeah, that was my challenge because I was such an introvert, and still am. And so it was a great journey of kind of coming more into that,
Right.
and being able to be more expressive because I wasn't in the competitive scene hardly at all, as far as being able to do that very well. Even though I went to nationals and I loved the competitive side, but the whole performing was like I was so.
Like being in front of a camera.
Yeah.
Camera shy, right?
Yeah,
Kind of the same essence.
definitely camera shy.
Yeah.
So, when I stopped and went into the service, it was a whole different world, and the journey went on, and I ended up doing professional skating, which is where I'm going with this.
Right.
Which was very helpful for a few years, and traveled, went around the world, and loved it, and then at a certain age, my body was just like, okay, but.
Yeah, exactly.
We're done with the performing because at 40-something years old and a solo skater, your body starts to talk to you and you're like, okay, I need to make a shift.
Yeah, totally. Now, in your spiritual journey, what was the most profound? What caused you to make that profound shift? And when was it when you had that first like paradigm shift in your life, where you were feeling kind of a certain way in life and something just sparked in you and shifted you?
I think part of it was myself being such a recluse, very introspective in nature. There were a lot of things that kind of made me just try and think outside of the box of what else is there in life and beyond and all of that. I had, I think the most profound shift I had was when I was, even before we met, I was 11 or 12 or something around there.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't a dream state experience, but it was an experience that I was kind of lying down, getting ready to go to sleep, and then there was the easiest way I can describe it was having an experience of such a profound love that I came out of the experience and I was weeping, and it was so incredibly impactful and powerful and moving that I never actually forgot that, However, when I went into high school, I definitely kind of was questioning things with a little bit of, maybe serious doubt.
Yeah.
Because
When you say questioning things, now let me ask you this too about that profound love that you, because to some people they probably won't know exactly what you mean by that, a profound love. So what was that profound love that you felt?
It felt like an ecstatic, it felt like a state of ecstasy and love that was beyond space and time, and it was completely unbounded, and
Okay.
it was like when it was a very angelic kind of experience. It kind of felt like there was this amazing, beautiful light that was in front of me, and it's not like I can make out that it was a particular angel or anything like that. However, I just remember sensing this light and this love, and it was like I didn't want it to stop.
And it was in pure silence, in pure presence.
It was absolute presence, absolute silence, absolute just knowing that, oh, this is what I am,
Right.
and I didn't want to be away from it.
Yeah.
And then a moment later, it started to recede, and I was just, almost heartbroken. It was like I'm not wanting to separate from that.
Right. That's beautiful, because it's almost like you experience it at a young age, like that. Right?
Yeah.
Something that is like, how do I get that back?
Exactly.
Almost like, how do
exactly.
I? So it's almost like a search for this thing that came to you deep within. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you search it out to find what that truth is really in.
Yeah.
We all do it, and that's a cool first step. I love that.
Yeah, it was. I think it was almost a premonition and maybe a sense of helping me realize going forward that I was always protected and I'd be okay.
Right.
Because it wasn't long after that I'll share that not long after that, I was about 12 or so, that I was molested by skating coach, and that just completely fucked up my head with like, what the hell is this? I mean, I've talked to other people that were a little bit older that went through that experience, and they were like, well, it was and they it doesn't matter what sexual preference you are. Some of them were okay with it, and some of them were like similar experiences myself. So that was really difficult, and that was partly what happened with like being able to not feeling comfortable performing,
kind of
being
receding.
Very much kind of contracting and like not really engaging very much with others and all of that. So that was kind of a definitely a kick in the pants of helping me just go forward with, okay, what's all of this, and so what's the meaning of life? What am I?
But you started having those kind of questions. How long after after you were molested, how long after that? Right after that, did it kind of recede for that search for that light, or did it kind of fan the flame of that search for that light again, or did you just sweep it under the rug for a while?
No, it was something I swept under the rug, and I think I told my mother. I think I did. I can't quite remember, but it was, to answer your question, it was something that I just kind of, okay, I'll try and forget about this, everything, and it was, and it just made more things difficult in high school.
Yeah.
And then, at a certain point, is when I graduated and I was going through that, I came across, like, Mom, actually was. She would talk about like some of the things she had read from Shirley MacLaine and some of those types of things.
It helped her.
It helped her,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then she talked about her book, Out on a Limb, and talked about, you know, ETs and UFOs and you know, yogis and Eastern philosophy, you know, and I was just like, oh, what is this?
Yeah.
This was like
that sparked your interest.
That sparked that lit a fire under me, and I was like, what is all this? Because I've always kind of felt attracted,
especially when it comes from your mother, you know, and you have a deep respect for your mother.
Absolutely.
And you're like, oh. So when you feel it and you see it, it's like, yeah. So that's a beautiful.
Yeah.
So it sounds like she may have been you one of your first.
I think she was
inspirational.
Yeah, without not even knowing it.
Yeah, not even knowing it. It's like me and you know.
Yeah, because that was, I hadn't even thought of that before, but that's beautiful. Yeah, she was. And so at 18 or 19, when I came across those books and you know, read her Out on a Limb, I just thought, okay, I want to investigate more of this. Right. She was talking about astral projection and being out of the body and going to the.
And you read about what age?
At that point, I was like 18 or 19.
18 or 19. Okay.
Yeah. And then when Shirley talked about the, you know, the spiritual bookstores and all of that, you know, I was near LA at the time, and I was like, well, I'm going to go down to Melrose.
Were you in Arrowhead?
I was in Arrowhead,
right.
like Arrowhead, training, actually, still skating. And I drove down to Melrose Booty Tree Bookstore and found autobiography, you know, not looking for it.
Right.
And
just came out.
Yeah. And when I read autobiography, you know, all bets are off. Okay, this is...
Right.
This is what I want.
Like most people who have read it with an open mind.
Yeah.
That's great. And so you were about 18, 19, and that's when I was deep in the heart of modeling.
Yes.
And I used to come back for 2 weeks at a time or so. When I'd come back from a trip, I'd come and visit, and Mark would be here, and you know, he'd be in the bedroom, and he'd have incense, and he had like this picture of this Indian person up on the bookshelf or on his altar, right? And at the time I was like going, wow, something that was kind of weird about it, but there was something that was really enchanting about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was at that age where I was just a partier and just going and doing this and right, but that was the first thing that really caught my attention to my heart, right? Calling. And that was at age 19-ish, 19, 20, right? And that's, and I didn't realize that until 10 years, 15 years later, that had such a huge impact on my spiritual path. And number one, I want to thank you for that, because you didn't even realize it, but I think you did, you know, because you're just being you.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I really appreciate and admire about you, is that you were always you. And when I was younger, I had a hard time being my true self. And when I was younger, you know, I had a lot of stuff going on too when I was younger, and I covered it up with humor. And I was always thought that I had to be the comedian, and that was my identity, you know?
Yeah.
And it wasn't my identity. My identity was just, true identity was being present. and when I didn't feel like I was being funny, I thought I was a failure. I thought that I was no good. I thought that I was useless if I wasn't being funny, because that's how I got out of my abusive. My second stepfather was an abusive. We were mentally and physically abused for about 8 years, and I got out of a lot of that from being humorous. Being the comedian, being the jester.
Yeah.
And so I kind of lived my life like that. And when we met, I was right out of that, and you were just beginning.
Yeah.
I was coming into the awesome presence of Herb. Herb is Mark's dad and my stepdad, who's just been a huge. You've seen videos of him. Just a classic
cowboy. Pollock.
Oh, amazing man.
Beautiful soul.
So I was just getting out of that abusive relationship, me and Robbie and Sherry and Mom. And Mom met this magical person, Herbie, who is Mark's father and Kimmy's father. Kim is my stepsister and Mark's sister. And that's where you came in to your stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then, now fast forward to what you just spoke about, to going to the Bodhi tree after Arrowhead.
Yeah.
And then,
I had not, speaking of kind of like pushing things under the carpet, not really dealing with certain things. When I got out of the competitive world, around 1988, I moved out of Lake Arrowhead, came back to LA. I came back to Sacramento, came back here actually,
right here.
And just I started junior college and was not a clue what in the hell I wanted to do, and just I really felt, because some of the energy around, like, because I hadn't really resolved any of the molest emotional feelings of, like, feeling almost raped and identity taken away and not being able to control anything. I'm like, what is this? And there were most people that I came across after I was able to get away from that coach and get him out of my life, and I didn't want to quit skating. I was able to find that opportunity down there, but there were some wonderful people down there, and there were also one or two people where I just felt like, very restrictive, and or I should say not comfortable around, even though I was much older.
Which is a guidepost.
Which is a guidepost. And feeling much older and able to go, okay, hands off, boundaries. Yeah. But I just kind of thought there was a part of me that snapped and just was like, I don't want to be around this anymore. Yeah. That whole energy.
Yes.
And so came back home, went to school. And then, but what my point saying, not having really dealt with anything, I also just was kind of like maybe running. Yep. Because I went right into the Air Force, like 8 months later.
In 89?
In 88.
88, you went to the Air Force.
Yeah. And I had a delayed enlistment, and so I waited, finished semester and went into the Air Force, spent 4 years, and within a year and a half to 2 years, I was like, okay, I'm not going to stay here, but,
so I finished the 4.
I finished the 4 years honorably, thank you.
Yes.
And then just got out, But during the whole time, I was meditating. I had Yogananda's picture on my,
while you were
in my dorm service. When I was in the service. Yeah. They thought I was kooky.
Yeah.
And
I know how they felt.
I had my candle. They thought,
but there was something about you that I'm sure was enchanting to them.
Yeah, because they were like, wait a minute,
spirit. That spirit.
They did pick up on that, because even I've got Yogananda and I've got my candle and I'm meditating on my bed, and
being you, man, which
being
is
me,
admirable.
And one of the reasons I chose Air Force was because I knew that for the enlisted folks just coming into the service, that it would be like 2 guys to a room,
right?
Navy, Army, Marines, it's like 30 guys to a room.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So I was like, I think I wanted to fly. I wanted to try and see if I could get into a flying program. Because
Herbie always talks about flying and flying.
Yeah, he did it when he was that age.
Yeah.
And So I would meditate in my room, and some guys were like, "What's that guy smoking?"
Yeah.
You know,
Incense?
which that's what it was.
Yeah, exactly.
But they were like, "Well, he's kind of cool. He's like, okay, that's
Yeah.
all he's doing. Oh, okay."
Well,
you
so
know.
you have a benign, powerful presence. You know what I mean? Where
Thank you.
that's what's really so likable about you is just you are you, and that's one thing that people. How can they not like you? You know, because if they don't like you, they're really trying to like. Okay. What's so that's what's so beautiful about that, you know, and then once you got out of the service, what did you do after you got out of the service?
That's when I went immediately to Ananda,
Okay.
because when I came across Autobiography of a Yogi,
Mm-hmm.
I was, even back then I was searching
Yeah.
for a place I didn't know it was going to be a monastery or an ashram, what we call it.
Yeah.
And so when I read Autobiography, I started looking in Sacramento
Yeah.
for a temple or a meditation place, and couldn't find anything from SRF at the time.
Right.
This was back in the mid '80s, so I actually came across Ananda. And Ananda was started by Kriyananda, Swami Kriyananda, who was a direct disciple of Yogananda.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, so it's close to home. Not that was really important, but it just happened to be there.
Yeah.
So I started meditating. This started like December '87, January '88.
Right.
That time frame. And so I started going to yoga classes, meditation.
Yeah.
And that's when I was just getting ready to sign up for the Air Force too.
Okay.
So I was
so that was before you went into the Air Force when you started. All right, because '88.
Yeah.
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 Right.
Yeah. So it was literally that time frame, and I was like, Air Force, when am I going to meditate? When am I going to be a yogi? What am I,
Yeah.
am I going to try and be a pilot? What the hell am I going to do?
The juggle.
So, and I wasn't communicative enough.
Would you like to top off?
Thank you. In my opinion, where other people in the family just felt like, well, let's talk about this, Mark.
Yeah.
They were just like, Mark, if you feel like you need to do that, go ahead.
Do what you got to do.
And so it was a challenge because in hindsight I certainly would have done a couple things differently,
Right.
But when I decided to go into the service, I thought, well, just make the best of it.
Yeah.
And but I was meditating the whole time I'm there. And then so when I came out, before I was even out, I was actually stationed. My last duty station was Mather Air Force Base.
Oh, it was.
Yeah, which is right off of Highway 50
Right, I
in
remember
Sacramento. And I ended up getting that because I did a remote tour in Turkey,
Okay.
which you remember.
Yep.
And because I did that remote tour, I was voluntarily, they were like, well, where do you want to go afterwards?
Right.
So they kind of offered that to me. So I just said, well, I'll go back to Sacramento.
Yeah.
And so I found Ananda before I even went into the service. So when I came back,
Right.
and I was literally doing correspondence yoga courses over the mail when I was in the military.
Right.
And they were literally being sent to me when I was in Turkey.
Oh, that's,
So I was doing yoga class, like reading all this yoga stuff,
that's great. That's beautiful. The peaceful warrior.
Yeah, exactly.
Talking literal.
Literally.
Well, what a perfect analogy of life, right? Adaptation.
Yep. There you go. There you
So-
go.
A little bit lower over here. So let's just have.
Little too low.
Yeah, a little too low. How's that? See if this works. All right.
Does that work for you?
I think this is good. But we're in the mud here.
Yeah.
Perfect. Even? Shh. Rock and roll.
To people.
Right.
But it was a beautiful experience, and
Oh, that's
then
That's awesome.
after that, I moved up to the Ananda community, the Ananda village, which
Right.
is in Nevada City,
Okay.
which is the main headquarters area, and that's where I did more yoga practice and kind of working my way up and being a minister and all of that. And
Ooh, that's
so
awesome.
That was my direction.
What year was that? 92-ish, 3-ish?
Being at the center
Yeah.
was 92.
Okay.
Being at the Ananda house in Sacramento
Okay.
was 92.
Okay.
93 was the building of the community of the Rancho Cordova, and so I was there for about 2 years.
Okay.
Not quite.
Right.
And then I moved up. At the time, I met somebody in the community, and we were kind of like basically, planning on ministering together as a couple and
Right.
that sort of thing. And so we ended up in
You and Dominique.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and and then we ended up moving in '94
Okay.
up to Nevada City,
Okay.
which is where I wanted to be anyway.
Who wouldn't?
And yeah,
So
it was
magical.
really wonderful.
Okay, so then after you were in the Ananda village, how long were you in Ananda village for?
From about '94 until '97,
97. Okay.
beginning of '97.
And you and he, Mark is also a well-known Vedic astrologer. When did you start to show interest in Vedic astrology?
When I moved to the village,
Yep.
there was one person there
Yeah.
that was considered their astrologer.
Okay.
And that was my introduction to the Vedic system.
Yeah.
Because I'd always been interested in astrology, but didn't really understand the whole symbolic meaning behind it. And how,
Sunday afternoon papers.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. And then I would read them, and I'd be like, okay,
Pretty bland.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, pretty generic.
Yeah.
And that's where I was introduced to the Vedic astrology system. And so, just interesting how people of like mind kind of connect and similar backgrounds and when I had a reading, I was really fascinated by it, and it wasn't long after that where I started studying.
Right.
And then the individual I ended up mentoring with he had been at Ananda like 10 years before.
Yeah.
And Dennis Harness, an amazing astrologer and
Yeah.
just a beautiful human being, and he's a he's a disciple of Yogananda.
Right.
And so that's who I ended up learning and studying with primarily. I had a couple of teachers.
That's great.
Yeah.
Really, really have grown that into a beautiful, beautiful practice.
Mm-hmm.
And can you tell us a little bit about how Vedic astrology works and what the difference is between, say, a Vedic astrology reading and like a Western astrology?
Sure. The Vedic system it's a lunar-based astrological system,
Right.
and it's also based on a sidereal calculation. Sidereal meaning fixed star placement. So
Okay.
what that means is the Vedic system takes into account the precession of the Earth. So the
Right.
precession is like, the axis of the Earth is, it's spinning like this, but it's doing a very slow wobble like that.
Right.
So the axis, so the true North Pole is not the exact same North Pole, I should say North Star.
Right.
As it was a few thousand years ago. So as it
Okay.
starts to change, the placements of where the zodiacs are in relation to the stars,
Right.
just shifts a little bit.
Subtly, right.
So, or I should say that the planetary placements will shift
Interesting.
because of the calculation. That's basically what it comes down to.
So that's why you need the exact time. That's why you need the month this year.
Right.
So it knows by calculations where the Earth is, as opposed to those 5,000 years ago when
Right.
Vedic
Right.
astrology 5,000 years old.
It's older than that, actually.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, it's
Approximately, yeah, right.
considered
The oldest.
the original
Okay.
system. It's mentioned a couple of times in the Vedas and by reference to the lunar signs. So, and Also, in Vedic astrology, we use the lunar constellations along with the solar sun. What we typically, the 12 signs.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Aries through Pisces.
Right.
Obviously we use those, but we also use the lunar constellations, which there's like 27 of those.
Okay. And those are all have to do within our solar system.
Yeah, those
Okay.
are you superimpose them like, to give you a visual. Just superimpose the lunar constellations on the zodiac that you know.
Okay, right. The 12.
So, because there's there's literally like two, the way it's added up or the way it's divided, if you look at it to make 360,
Right.
is like it's like 2.5 lunar signs within one zodiac.
Right.
Within the sign of Aries.
Okay.
And then,
Right. Okay, so that makes sense then. And so that mathematical calculation of the Vedic astrology, say for instance when you do mine, you ask for all of my, like I just said, the exact birthday, the
time, location,
right?
all of that.
And then all of that is when you put that into your program, it already calculates how the Earth has moved since then, where things are going.
Exactly.
And so that's what all of that represents. I never knew that until now. That's pretty interesting.
Yes.
So Western is more general, would you say?
I would say it's a little more general. It's more based on the
more of like an assembly line?
Spring equinox and
Right.
the vernal equinox,
Right.
and kind of like it goes by the spring dates of the season,
Okay.
and not necessarily the exact location of where the planets are.
Okay.
It's
so
close.
So
It's
that would
close.
be the difference between Western and Vedic is that 23-degree calculation.
Yeah.
Vedic is more, I would say, as I'm understanding, more precise. A little bit more precise in each individual being. Soul.
I look at it, for me, that's my interpretation.
Right.
And I think there's a spiritual depth to the Vedic system because of its origin.
Okay.
And that's what attracted me to it.
Yeah.
And
To take nothing away from Western, I realize
not
that.
to take anything from the Western.
Because I know I've always
system.
been confused at what the exact difference between the Western and the Vedic was, and I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Encaps-
Easiest way to think about it is the difference in the calculation and the placement of the planets.
Okay.
Which is off by a difference of one sign or so.
Okay.
Not if it's within a particular degree, it doesn't really change the sign placement, but usually it will.
Right.
And so, for me, it's kind of a deeper spiritual interpretation of our astrological, our spiritual connection to even being on the planet.
Right.
There's more. I look at the Western side that deals maybe a little bit more on the emotional personality side of interpreting somebody's chart.
Right.
Which is great for a lot of people, because that was like, oh, that's why I'm attracted to so and so.
Right.
Okay. The Vedas also, get really granular with their interpretations. So that's what attracted me to that.
That's interesting because when you do my charts, it's pretty direct and it's been pretty right on. And if any of you are interested in having your charts read by Mark, it's absolutely phenomenal. He gets right down to the nitty-gritty, and it's really, really phenomenal how accurate it appears to be, And
because there's always give and take 20% of like, well, okay,
and it's really, really amazing to see and feel, looking at the charts he read for me 9 years ago, where I am now, and then reading, talking to him about where I am today, and it's like, wow, it's like I'm on such the same path that it was actually charted out to me, a couple years ago, and it's really cool to see how accurate it has been with me. Although I don't normally follow it, on a regular basis. But some people really, really rely on this. and it really helps navigate
Yeah.
their lives.
Yeah.
Because some people just like to live their life that way, to where there's a knowing to it, like a
Yeah, that's what attracted me to it.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, part of the whole attraction was also understanding. It literally came from the rishis, or the sages that kind of developed this system through years and years of just observation,
right.
of seeing where everything was, and then they would look at events around them. So I don't want to give people the impression like, oh, the planets are going to do this influence on you. They kind of represent windows of periods of time that are favorable for certain things to kind of take place.
Right.
So that's kind of how I've looked at it for a long time. And the rishis and the sages, they came up with this because it was like, well, how can we best help ourselves spiritually through this practice?
Right.
It's like, well, okay, if you understand certain challenges are coming, or potential challenges are coming, you can, basically Shirley MacLaine said it, is like, well, being forewarned is being like forearmed, and I've always loved that, because it really helps the psyche within deal with, like, okay, well, you kind of prepare for certain things, and it helps our meditation practice and all of that stuff, because it's on so many levels. It's like mentally, physically. It's everything. I bring back to the experience of like, how can we best bring ourselves to a point of balance,
Right.
in life. Because that's, for me, that's.
I think that's such a beautiful point, and it reminds me of when you just brought up Shirley MacLaine again, and how how it came to me. It just came to me. Just reminded me, was I ran into Shirley MacLaine at the store in Malibu, right?
Oh, you told me about
Yep,
that.
remember?
Yeah.
And so I was it was in Vons or Pavilions, right in Point Doom, and I was walking through there, and I see her over there. I'm going, it's Shirley MacLaine. And right then was when I realized how much you
interesting.
were such a huge part of my life. And so I went over there and I thanked her for that.
That's cool.
And this was probably about 8 years ago, maybe 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I walked up to her and I said, I go, "Your name is Shirley, right?" She goes, "Yes." I go, "Well, my name is Ron, and I just wanted to thank you because you indirectly shifted my life through my brother." And she was like, "Really?" I said, "Yes." And I want to thank you for that. And she gave me a big hug, and I gave her a big hug.
Sweet.
And I said, "Thank you." I go, "You're a goddess, and I really love you, and I love you too." And then I said, "Enjoy your day," and I went off. And that was the day. That's when I realized it, how you affected my life, was through seeing her. I mean, she was put there,
Yes,
for that moment,
Yeah.
and that's what was so. It's amazing who really affects us in our life, and it doesn't necessarily have to be on our spiritual path, although the path we're walking is really a spiritual path.
Yes.
But whatever you want to call it, right?
Right.
And when you truly disconnect from anything that takes you away from spirit, from our true essence, that's what I want to veer away from, and that's what I've been veering away from for a long time. Because when I'm not present in that authentic mode
And owning that.
and living it,
Yeah.
and being reminded when I go off course by my feelings and my discord and all the stuff that takes me away from being happy and being the bliss that we are.
Yes.
That is the constant reminder, and breath.
Yeah.
Because every time I get out of this course, sometimes I react a little bit too fast maybe, but I grab it, I rein it in with some breath,
Mm-hmm.
and return, and
Yeah.
I remember you sitting so magically, peacefully in the room back in 19 years old, meditating, and I'd be walking, incense coming out the bottom of the door, and I'm like going, but man, it was enchanting.
Yeah.
It was kind of, it was just, it was something that I wasn't used to, and it was like something that was like,
it was definitely foreign.
yes,
But
and,
there was something that,
and
charming
and growing
about
up around a lot of bigoted people, I wasn't a bigot, I wasn't racist, but
there were a lot of people
always
around you.
around, and so it's
Yeah.
always kind of hitting me, and so I would see in different cultures to where I couldn't believe it, but I was still ingrained, right? And so that was part of it in it too, just stuff that I grew up with.
Sure.
But I'm so glad that other side outweighed that
Yeah.
other side. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
that's the goal. Love's got to outweigh
Yeah.
unlove.
Yeah. Well, your chart's too strong.
Yeah.
Your birth chart's too strong. Your astrological birth chart's too strong for that not to have happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was destined
Yeah,
for
yeah.
this life for
Yeah.
that to come through that
Yeah.
muck and all of that energy and just go, wait a second, no, there's a higher truth.
Oh yeah.
So that's my exact same experience with for coming, always trying to come back from a place of centered and balance and equanimity and
Yeah.
just a place of calmness.
Yeah.
And because I really feel like when the personality or our reactions, take ourselves out of this, internal, sacred, absolute divine energy that we are,
Yeah.
and it pulls us into these reactions
Yeah.
of like,
Yeah.
which happens to all of us,
Yeah.
and I just go, okay, breath.
Yeah. It's a practice.
And that's why I have a bloody altar in my workplace
Yeah.
and in my home place, because I have Christ and Baba and Yogananda and they are always a constant reminder to me
Yeah.
of just like be in the present moment
Mm-hmm.
and just walk from that place and react from that place, and no matter what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really difficult when you have certain personalities you have to interact with, and a lot of times in those situations I literally just go, for me a prayer is like an expression from India. It's like from Baba's ashram, and it's Om Sai Ram.
Om Sai Ram.
Om Sai Ram, and it's the Om, the creative force energy of God and presence of all it is, Sai, the mother, and Ram, God the Father. And so I will say that quite a bit,
Yeah.
because it really you can just feel it right now. It just,
Yeah.
and it brings you in, and you just feel it's so grounding, and it's so calming.
Yeah.
And it's so helpful for the people that even though they don't know what you're saying,
Yeah.
because most times I won't verbalize it,
Right,
but I'll
they'll
be
feel
going
it.
Om Sai Ram,
Energetically, they'll feel it, even
energetically they'll walk away and they'll be like,
if they don't. Yeah.
okay,
And it's it's like what I do something that's very similar to that, and we've all got our own practice.
yeah,
And I am always, people always used to see me walking down, like when I first was on my paradigm shift, when I really started connecting with breath, where I knew the healing power of breath.
yeah,
I would do that on the very first stages 22 plus years ago, right? 22 years ago. And people would always, man, he breathes a lot. He's like, it's like God, why do you breathe? And then I would add the old, not really, but just feeling that,
Yeah.
right? And not really knowing exactly what that, I just knew that was healing. It was vibratory.
Yeah.
It raised the vibration of
Yeah.
my whole body, right? When I
Yeah.
inhaled, and my friend Sujan came up with this beautiful phrase. It says, breathe in God's love, exhale your love. And I always used to say, breathe in the good, exhale the bad. But now I look at that and I'm going, wait, I don't want to be putting bad out into the energy,
right.
And that's a really great way of thinking about it.
It is.
Because you're breathing in the infinite love, right?
and you're returning at
and
the
then
same
returning,
Yeah,
and
from
you're
your own
filtering it through your own being, right?
from your
that
own
love.
sacred being.
And then putting it back out, you know?
Yeah.
And it's that Om, it's that Om,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Shanti,
Yeah.
Shanti, Amen.
Yeah.
There's a reason, you know,
Yes.
all of that is in
Exactly.
the scriptures.
Exactly.
Because that is what is the healing cosmic vibration, you know? So try it. You know, we're always breathing. We're always breathing. And just tap into it. That's when you're feeling a little bit out of center,
Mm-hmm.
feeling a little fearful, feeling a little sad, feeling a little, hey, embrace it. But that's a guidepost to return you to your presence, to the alignment that we all are on in our own pathway.
Breath is the quickest way.
That's the diffuser, man.
Yeah.
That's the pathway to
Yeah.
peace, the pathway to presence, you know?
Yeah.
And it's and that's what's so beautiful about when we spend time together. It's like that's what we talk about, and that's what I really like to spend time doing, is being in nature, being in spirit company, because we always are, right?
Yeah.
And you were just such a huge influence on me, and I want to thank you for that. Yeah. You have a prayer as we sign out,
Mm-hmm.
or anything else that comes to you?
I'll say an Indian prayer that is about recognizing and connecting with our own divinity that's everywhere present. And it goes like this. It's Om Bhur Bhuvaswaha Tat Savitur Varninyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Naha Prachodayat Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thank you, Divine Spirit.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us on this magical morning. And what is your contact information?
Spiritofastrology.org is the
The Razzle.